Teachers, have you ever been told by your administrator that center time is just playing? Maybe you're even one of the unlucky ones who's been told that you can no longer have centers because they're just for fun and there's not enough academic learning taking place. Or even worse, maybe you thought about throwing in the towel on centers because they're just too darn hard to manage. Today, I'm going to dispel 6 myths that preschool teachers should never fall for when it comes to learning centers. For our listeners or viewers who need hard facts or evidence to defend centers to their administrators or colleagues, this episode is for you. And it's also for those of you who've ever thought about calling it quits on center time. So those 6 myths I just mentioned are: number 1, kids are just playing at centers. Number 2, centers are too noisy. Number 3, centers are too much work. Number 4, centers are too chaotic. Number 5, they're too messy. And number 6, too hard to manage. You see, it turns out that there's one big reason that we must have centers in the early childhood classroom. And that reason is research-based and backed by science. And that reason, my friends, is executive function skills. That's right. It turns out that having learning centers in your classroom is crucial for your students' success in school and life. When it comes to educational hills that I'm willing to die on, learning centers is one I believe we need to defend at all costs. Because when it comes to preschool or pre-K, it doesn't matter how much power you have or how many degrees you've earned. If you don't know anything about how young children learn and grow, then just sit down. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. On to the myths. Executive function skills are located in the prefrontal cortex of the human brain, and these skills are crucial to us as humans for our entire lives. They start developing in infancy and aren't even considered fully developed until you're almost 30 years old. Let that sink in for a minute. When young children are working, not playing, at centers, they're developing these executive function skills that will form the foundation of all their future behavior and learning. So let's start with the first myth. Centers are just for playing and not learning. Now, I think we can all agree that kids have trouble waiting for a turn with anything, right? A few of the executive function skills at work here are time management, problem solving, and impulse control. When they're waiting for a turn, say for a truck in the block center, they're practicing and developing their impulse control and time management skills. And our job at centers is to help our students learn how to share, take turns, and wait for a turn, right? And the way we do that is by walking them through problem-solving scenarios and providing them with supports in the form of picture cues and timers and things like that to help them become successful. The second myth is that centers are too noisy. Executive function skills come into play here because being too noisy, that is an impulse control issue. And I just did an entire episode on that about dealing with loud noise in the classroom. You can go back and watch that right now. Children need to be taught how and when to use indoor and outdoor voices explicitly, because telling isn't teaching, right? We have to show them. And the way we do that is by providing daily opportunities for students to practice impulse control and self-monitoring, right? I can't think of a better way to do that than through centers. Can you? The third myth is that centers are too much work. And listen, I get it, because centers absolutely can feel like too much work if you don't have the right systems in place to work smarter, not harder. Because if you don't have smart systems in place, then you're setting yourself and your students up for failure during center time because you're going to be working harder and not smarter. So if this is an area that you're struggling with, you might want to download my free Center Essentials guide, which includes photographs and materials lists for each center in the early childhood classroom. The fourth myth is that centers are too chaotic. And it's true, centers can often feel chaotic. This is where the executive function skills of problem solving, organization, Flexibility, time management, impulse control, and task initiation come into play. That's a whole lot of executive function skills, right? I like to think of the role we play as early childhood professionals to that of being the conductor of a symphony orchestra, right? The musicians, they're playing the music. Those are the kids in your classroom. The instruments represent the noise, and you're trying to be the conductor who orchestrates all the different components at once to get a beautiful result. The thing is, most musicians don't start out playing their instruments perfectly. It takes lots and lots of time and practice to get it right. Centers provide a way for your symphony, quote unquote, to practice while you're providing feedback and helping them identify where improvements need to be made. The next myth is that centers are too messy and that kids can't or don't clean up very well. This is where we can focus on the executive function skills of flexibility, organization, and time management. Flexibility is all about those transitions, right? For center time, you must have well-established transitions in place for your kids, along with supports in the form of a visual timer and picture cue reminders for time management. Then you're going to set them up for success during cleanup time using your picture schedule and labels for organizational support. And of course, all of this takes place in the form of modeling and practicing with you over and over again, just like that symphony orchestra practices. And if your kids don't treat the center materials well, then you guessed it, you teach them how to treat them well by modeling and practicing some more. And you can find visuals and supports for each of the things I just mentioned in my shop, where you'll find done for you picture schedules, labels, and a cleanup routine. You can find my shop at the link below the video if you're watching. Click the down arrow to expand the box, or you can go to prekpages.com. Now that brings me to my sixth and final myth that preschool teachers should never fall for, and that's centers are just too hard to manage. This one involves almost all the executive function skills, and it's the ultimate proof that centers must be kept in all early childhood classrooms. You see, we as early childhood professionals, we provide the framework for centers in our classrooms. We arrange the center using our expertise and knowledge. We stock the shelves with age-appropriate materials. We label those materials, and we have procedures and routines in place for every aspect of center time. And if you're missing just one of these steps that I just mentioned, you will struggle with center time. And there are also plenty of systems that you can use if you have a large class, because that's often the conflict when it comes to center time. If you have a small class, they're much easier to manage. With a large class, you get large problems, right? And there's a center management package in my shop at Pre-K Pages as well, if you need it. Perhaps the most difficult aspect of all when it comes to centers is that each child is different, and they develop these executive function skills at their own individual pace, which makes things super tricky. I practiced and modeled every day for 6 weeks at the beginning of the year, but my kids are still struggling. That's because they all don't learn at the same time. So while you may have been saying all of those things and doing all of those wonderful things with your entire class, little Jimmy, we'll take him as an example, he might have got it and he continues on all year, no problems at center time. While little Patty over here, she may not have been ready for that. Like, she was still not there. And so she still needs that time and practice to get it right. That makes it really tricky, and it can take much longer. And then we have those children who have experienced trauma, or if they have any delays, they may need much more specific individual supports than I just mentioned. So yes, centers are hard to manage, but that should never be a reason to ban them from our classrooms. I would love to chat with any administrators out there who feel that centers in the preschool or pre-K classroom are not necessary. But unfortunately, I'm afraid I would be on the phone 24/7 because there's not a day that goes by where I don't hear from a preschool teacher who has been told that they can no longer have centers in their classroom. And it truly deeply breaks my heart. And it just highlights the extreme crisis that we have in the early childhood field here in the US. But for now, you can do two things. The first is to share this podcast episode with any early childhood teachers you know. The second is to take a step back and take time to really work on making your center framework as strong and solid as it can be so you can spend less time managing and more time teaching. And if you want to learn more about the importance of executive function skills, then you don't want to miss my annual Soar to Success Summit this summer. Our topic this year is all about executive function skills and how you can support their healthy development in the early childhood classroom or at home. So you can go and add that to your calendar, add that event to your calendar right now at soartosuccesssummit.com. And don't forget to download your free Center Essentials Guide if you want help or need more information about stocking and setting up learning centers in your classroom. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. Onward and upward.